The human transport ship slowed as it entered the orbit of the alien homeworld. The planet below was covered in shining cities but surrounded by scars of battle. Burned land stretched for miles, broken war machines lay silent, and the sky carried faint streaks from past weapon fire. It was a world built for war, and yet now the humans had come not with guns, but with words. Ethan Carter sat in his seat, watching the view outside. He had fought in battles before, but this mission was not about fighting. Earth had sent him as part of a small team to join peace talks with the Rulian Empire. The Rulians had been locked in war with many alien races for centuries, and now their queen had finally agreed to speak with humans. Ethan did not know why they chose him, a simple soldier, to be part of the delegation. Perhaps it was because he had seen both war and the value of peace. The ship landed in a great courtyard made of blackstone. Tall spires rose on each side, guarded by alien warriors in silver armor. The Rulians were taller than humans, with pale skin marked by faint glowing lines. Their eyes were sharp, their movements precise, and their presence heavy. This was a species that had lived for battle. The humans walked out together. Ethan kept his steps steady, though he felt the eyes of hundreds of warriors on him. Then the great doors opened, and the alien queen entered the courtyard. She was taller than all others, armored in dark metal with a flowing cloak behind her. Her crown looked less like jewelry and more like part of a weapon. Her face was striking, her eyes burning with focus, but there was something deeper within them. Something Ethan could not name. The delegation leader, Ambassador Harris, stepped forward and began formal words of peace. But Ethan could not take his eyes off the queen. She stood with power, yet when her gaze shifted toward him, it lingered longer than it should. It made him uneasy. It was as if she was measuring him, not as a soldier, not as a human, but as something else. When the talks ended for the day, Ethan was surprised to be summoned alone to the Queen's chamber. He walked through halls of stone and banners until he stood before massive doors. They opened slowly, and inside he saw her waiting. The chamber was not soft or royal. It was filled with weapons, maps of battle, and statues of warriors. She stood, at the center, her cloak off, revealing the strong build of someone born and shaped for endless conflict. "You are Ethan," she said. Her voice was sharp, yet calm. "Yes," he answered carefully. She walked closer, her eyes never leaving. "Hiss, do you know what I am?" He swallowed, unsure of the right answer. "You are the Queen of the Rulians." A faint smile touched her lips, though it held no warmth. "No, human. I am more than that. I was made for war. My body, my mind, my blood, all designed to lead armies, to fight until nothing remains." She stopped just a step away, her gaze heavy. "That is what I am." Ethan felt the weight of her words. She was not boasting. She was stating truth. But something inside him pushed him to speak. "Then why look at me like that?" For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if caught off guard. She tilted her head, studying him. "Like what?" "Not like a weapon. Not like an enemy. You look at me like—" He paused, searching for words. "Like I'm something you don't expect to see." The queen's face held stillness, but her eyes gave her away. There was a softness, just for a heartbeat, before. The steel returned. She turned away and walked toward a wall of glowing maps. "You speak boldly for a human." "Maybe," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But I think you didn't call me here only to remind me you were made for war." She touched the map, lines of battles lighting beneath her hand. "My people think peace is weakness. They built me to be strength itself. Yet here you stand, a soldier of a weaker species, and you speak without fear." She glanced back at him. "Why?" Ethan thought of Earth, of families waiting for their soldiers to return, of children who laughed even after cities burned. Because fear doesn't change anything, he said. And because I've seen enough war to know that sometimes strength is not in fighting but in choosing not to. Her eyes held his again, long, quiet, searching. Then she stepped closer, so near he could feel the heat of her presence. You are either very foolish or very different from the others. Maybe both, Ethan said with a half smile. The queen almost smiled in return but stopped herself. Her gaze lingered, more human than alien in that moment. Then she straightened, her voice sharp once more. Leave now. We will speak again. Ethan bowed his head slightly, turned, and walked out. Yet his heart was unsettled. She was made for war, yes, but behind her steel eyes he had seen something she herself did not want to admit, and he knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, the humans were led into the council chamber of the Rulians. It was a vast room carved into black stone, lit by high flames that never burned out. The alien lords sat on their tall chairs, armor gleaming, faces cold. At the highest seat stood the queen. Her presence filled the room more than the flames or stone. Her gaze scanned across the humans but stayed on Ethan a moment longer, though no one else seemed to notice. Ambassador Harris spoke carefully about peace, trade, and alliance. His words were diplomatic, shaped to please. But the Rulians did not look pleased. They whispered to each other, their voices sharp and doubtful. To them, humans were still an untested species, too fragile, too young. Humans speak of peace, one of the lords said loudly. But what power do they hold? They are not strong enough to fight us. Why should we trust weak hands to hold any agreement? The chamber echoed with murmurs. Ethan sat quietly, but his fists tightened. He knew. The humans had fought wars before, had bled and sacrificed. But he also knew he was not there to start an argument. Still, he could feel the queen's eyes on him, as if she was waiting to see what he would do. Later, when the meeting ended, Ethan stepped outside into the cold air of the courtyard. He wanted space away from polished words. He was not a diplomat. He was a soldier, and he always felt out of place in halls filled with politics. He leaned against the stone wall, watching the alien banners sway. "You are restless," a voice said behind him. He turned and saw the queen herself, walking alone without her guards. Her steps were steady, yet quieter than he expected for someone in armor. "Your people spoke well," Ethan said carefully. She raised an eyebrow. "And yet you did not." Ethan gave a small laugh. "I'm not a speaker. I'm just here to watch." "No," she said firmly, her eyes locking on his. "You were chosen for more than that. I watched you in the chamber. You burned with words." "You did not say?" He hesitated. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes, because your lords call us weak, but they don't see the truth. Humans survive by more than strength. We fight for reasons that matter: family, freedom, each other. We are not born for war like you, but we still fight when we must. That's something they don't understand." The queen's face stayed still, but her eyes shifted, softer for a moment. "You speak of reasons. My people were never given a choice. I was not given a choice. I was made for war." Her voice carried weight, but this time it did not sound like pride. It sounded like a burden. Ethan noticed it. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Then maybe that's why you keep looking at me. Because I remind you of choice." Her lips parted slightly, her eyes narrowing as if he had struck something hidden deep inside. She did not answer at once. Instead, she turned and began walking, slowly toward the training grounds nearby. Ethan followed. The training yard was filled with alien warriors clashing with heavy blades, their cries sharp as steel. The queen stepped onto the platform, and instantly the warriors bowed and made way. She picked up a long weapon and spun it with ease. The crowd watched in silence as she cut through the air like a storm. When she finished, she pointed the blade toward Ethan. "Fight me," she ordered. He blinked. "Fight you? I'm not." "You are a soldier," she said firmly. "Show me what humans fight for. Show me your strength if you claim to have any." The warriors cheered softly, eager to see. Ethan knew this was dangerous. She was faster, stronger, built for battle. But something in her eyes told him this was not about winning, it was about testing him. He stepped forward, taking a training staff from the rack. He spun it once in his hand, steadying his breath. The queen attacked first. Her strike was fast, sharp, nearly breaking his defense in one blow. The impact sent shivers through his arms, but he stood his ground. The fight continued. She moved. Like fire, every strike precise. Ethan dodged, blocked, and countered when he could. He knew he could not overpower her, so he focused on endurance. He used speed, timing, and instinct. The warriors around them shouted as the fight grew fierce. At last, the queen struck his staff aside and pushed him down to the ground with her blade at his chest. The warriors roared in approval, but she did not deliver a final strike. Instead, she stared down at him, her breath steady, her eyes locked with his. "You do not yield," she said. "And you don't stop looking at me," Ethan replied, still, catching his breath. For the first time, she looked away quickly as if something inside her shifted. She pulled her weapon back and turned to the crowd. "Enough," she declared, her voice commanding. The warriors bowed and stepped aside. She helped Ethan to his feet, her grip firm but strangely gentle. "You fight with spirit, human. It is not strength of body but strength of will." She paused, her voice lowering. "And that is why I look at you." Ethan met her eyes, realizing he had broken through something deeper than armor. He nodded slowly. "Then maybe you weren't only made for war. For a heartbeat." The queen's face softened, but then the mask returned. She stepped back, her voice strong again. "Go now. Tomorrow we meet again in council. But remember this. I am queen, and my people will not accept weakness." Ethan bowed his head slightly, but inside, he carried her words. He knew she was more than what she claimed to be, and perhaps in the days ahead, he would be the one to help her see it fully. The next day began with heavy clouds over the alien capital. The city looked less like a place for living and more like a fortress carved into stone. Towers rose high, their walls marked by the scars of past battles. Banners of the Rulians flew in the wind, each symbol telling stories of war. The humans were escorted once again into the council chamber. Ethan walked behind Ambassador Harris, his mind still replaying the fight with the queen. Every strike, every glance, every word she had spoken stayed with him. She had admitted, though quietly, that she looked at him because he carried something different. Strength of will. Choice. That thought made him uneasy, but it also gave him courage. Inside the chamber, the atmosphere was sharp. The alien lords were restless. They had heard of the queen's spar with the human soldier, and whispers ran across the room. Many saw it as foolish, some as weakness. When the queen entered, silence dropped at once. Her presence still silenced all doubt, but Ethan noticed how their eyes lingered with suspicion. The meeting began with more discussion of peace terms. The humans spoke of trade, cooperation, and building a future without constant wars. But one alien lord slammed his hand against the table. "We do not need peace. The Rulian Empire was forged in battle. To end war is to end our very strength." Others agreed, nodding firmly. The queen sat at the head, silent, her gaze unreadable, but Ethan could see her jaw tighten. She did not speak at first, letting the argument swirl like storm winds. Finally, she rose. "Enough!" her voice thundered. The chamber froze. "You speak as if war is endless glory. But how many of our people have we buried? How many children grow up with nothing but ashes around them? Strength is not only in destruction, strength is also in building. The lords fell quiet. Some bowed their heads slightly, others glared with unease. Ethan watched carefully. She was speaking not only to them, but to herself. He could see it, the struggle inside her, the pull between what she was made to be and what she wanted to be. After the council ended, the humans were dismissed. But once again, Ethan was summoned privately. He walked through long stone corridors, his steps echoing in the silence. He entered the queen's chamber and found her standing near the window, looking out at the city. "You heard them?" she said without turning. "They do not want peace. They want me to lead them into war again." "And what do you want?" Ethan asked softly. She turned to face him. Her eyes burned, but not with anger, with conflict. "What I want does not matter. I was made for war, human. They see me as nothing else. I am their weapon, their queen, their shield. If I choose another path, they will call me weak." Ethan stepped closer. "Maybe. But yesterday when you fought me, you didn't fight to destroy me. You fought to see who I was. That wasn't war. That was searching." Her eyes narrowed, but she did not deny it. She walked slowly toward him, her armor whispering against the stone floor. "You speak as if you can see inside me, human, but you know nothing of my burden." Ethan stood his ground. "Maybe not, but I know what I saw in your eyes. You don't want to be only what they made you. You're more than a weapon. You're more than war." For a long moment, silence filled the chamber. The queen's eyes softened, just slightly, as if a wall had cracked. But before she could answer, the heavy doors burst open. A young alien guard rushed in, his voice urgent. "My queen, enemy ships have entered our outer orbit. A rival faction moves to strike." The queen's face turned sharp again. She raised her chin, her voice strong. "Summon the fleet. Prepare the defenses." The guard bowed and rushed out. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "A rival faction?" She nodded, already moving toward the weapon racks. She took her blade and strapped it across her back. "Our empire has enemies who would see me fall. They wait for any sign of weakness. Now they come." She turned to him. "You will remain with the human delegation. You are not to fight." But Ethan shook his head. "You know I can't do that. If battle comes, I stand with you." Her eyes locked on his, fierce but unreadable. Then for the briefest moment, her lips curved into something close to a smile. "You are stubborn, human." Alarms echoed through the city. The great walls rumbled as shields activated. Alien ships rose into the skies, dark silhouettes against the clouds. The sound of war drums began to beat across the capital, a rhythm that shook the stones themselves. The queen led her warriors into the command hall, where massive screens showed enemy ships entering the atmosphere. The rival faction's fleet was large and well-armed. The lords muttered fearfully, their earlier calls for war now turning to doubt. The queen raised her voice. "Do not falter. They come thinking we are weak. We will show them our strength." But then she paused. Her eyes slid to Ethan, who stood at the edge of the hall. Her voice lowered, though still loud enough to be heard. "Not just strength of war, strength of will," the warriors shouted in unison, rallying behind her. Yet Ethan noticed the glance she gave him. Quiet, personal, different from the speech. The battle began as enemy ships rained fire over the skies. The city shields shook under the blasts. Alien fighters launched into the air, colliding in flashes of light. The ground quaked as rival troops landed near the outer gates. The queen led the charge herself. She moved like a storm, her blade cutting through enemy lines, her cloak flowing behind her. The warriors followed her roar, their spirits unshaken. Ethan could not stay behind. He picked up a fallen weapon and fought beside the alien guards. He was not as strong, not as fast, but he was relentless. Every strike he made was to protect the Queen's warriors, to cover their flanks. In the chaos, he saw her glance back at him once, even in the middle of the fight. Her eyes carried both fire and something else, something human, something unspoken. The enemy pressed harder, but together they pushed back. The Queen struck down the rival commander herself, her final blow sending silence through the battlefield. The enemy forces broke and fled, their ships retreating into the sky. The city stood, battered but unbroken. Warriors cheered, drums thundered, and the Queen stood tall among her people. Yet her gaze turned to Ethan, still catching his breath, weapon in hand. She walked to him slowly, her voice low so only he could hear. "You disobeyed me, human. I told you not to fight." Ethan smiled faintly, though tired. "I told you I wouldn't stand by and watch." She looked at him for a long moment. Her hand, armored and strong, touched his shoulder briefly. "You fight not because you were made for it. You fight because you choose to. That is the difference." And, for the first time, her voice carried not command, not burden, but respect. The morning after the battle was quiet, but heavy. The alien capital was alive with whispers. Some warriors praised the Queen's strength. Others questioned the human's role in the fight. Ethan could feel the weight of their eyes as he moved through the halls. The Queen called him to the training grounds once more. This time the air was cooler, the sky gray with clouds. She stood waiting, her armor polished, her expression unreadable. "You fought well yesterday," she said, "but war is not the only test of strength." Ethan nodded. "I know. Sometimes strength means holding back." She looked at him closely. "Your people speak of will and choice. But here, will is tested every day. Choice is a luxury for the weak." He stepped forward. "But is it really weakness to choose peace? To fight for something beyond yourself?" Her eyes softened just a little. "You ask hard questions, human. Because you showed me that even a queen made for war can wonder if there is more." She smiled, small but real. "Perhaps I am learning from you." Over the next days, Ethan and the Queen spent time together beyond the council and the training yard. She asked him about Earth, about his family, about why humans kept fighting even when the odds were against them. "You fight because you believe in tomorrow," he told her, "because you have people who matter." She listened, sometimes silent, sometimes asking more. The walls she wore began to crack, revealing glimpses of a person who longed for freedom. But not everyone watched with kindness. Some of the Queen's advisors whispered warnings. "She spends too much time with the human. It clouds her judgment." One night, Ethan was approached by a guard loyal to the Queen. "They say you are changing her," the guard said. "Be careful. Their loyalty lies with the old ways." Ethan looked at him. "Change is not always bad." The guard shook his head. "In war, change is danger." Soon signs of rebellion stirred. Factions within the empire moved against the Queen's new ideas. They called her weakness, a betrayal. The Queen summoned Ethan in secret. "They plot to remove me," she said, "to end this peace before it begins." "We will stand together," Ethan promised, "no matter the cost." When the rebellion erupted, the Queen and Ethan fought side by side. The palace became a battlefield of shadows and steel. Though the Queen was powerful, the enemy was close and fierce. In the heart of the fight, the Queen was struck and fell. Ethan refused to leave her side. He carried her through dark halls, fighting off enemies with all his strength. In those moments, she looked at him with new eyes. "You saved me," she whispered. "Not because I was a queen, but because you chose to." He smiled gently. "And I will keep choosing you." The rebellion failed, but the Queen was changed. She no longer wore warlike armor alone. She led with both strength and heart. When she addressed her people again, her voice was clear and strong. "We will end the endless wars. We will fight for peace." The Empire was stunned, but the Queen's eyes held fire. And when she looked at Ethan, there was no doubt about who had changed her and who she now chose to fight for. The days after the rebellion were filled with tension and change. The Queen had survived, but the wounds were deep, not only in her body, but in the heart of the Empire. The ruling council was divided. Some feared her new ideas of peace, others hoped for a future beyond endless war. Ethan stayed close by her side, helping her heal and plan. Together, they walked the halls of the palace, now quieter but heavy with the memories of battle. One morning, the Queen called a meeting with her closest advisors. She spoke clearly, without fear. "We have seen what endless war brings, only loss and pain. It is time for a new path, not weakness, but strength through unity." Some advisors nodded, others scowled. The Queen's voice grew firmer. "I will lead us there, not as a queen made for war, but as a leader who chooses peace." Outside the palace, word spread quickly. Some cheered, believing the Empire could finally find rest. Others whispered of betrayal, warning of dangers ahead. Ethan watched as the Queen's resolve grew. She trained harder, not just in combat, but in diplomacy and understanding. She wanted to prove that strength was more than the sword. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, the Queen spoke softly. "I never thought I could want more than war, but you showed me there is another way." Ethan smiled. "You were always more than war. You just needed to see it." Their bond deepened, built on trust and shared dreams for a better future. But dangers still lurked. Rival factions watched, waiting for any sign of weakness. Then, a new threat appeared. A group of alien leaders refused to accept the Queen's change. They gathered armies, preparing to challenge her rule once more. The Queen faced them with courage. She sent messages of peace, but prepared for war if needed. Ethan stood beside her, ready to fight for the future they believed in. The battle that followed was fierce. The Queen led her forces with skill and heart. Ethan fought beside her, defending her and inspiring the troops. In the final clash, the Queen faced the rebel leader. Their fight was brutal, a clash of old ways and new hopes. But the Queen's strength came not just from her power, but from her will to protect her people and the future. She won, ending the rebellion with honor. Her people saw not only a warrior, but a true leader. After the victory, the Queen addressed her empire. "We will no longer be slaves to war. We will build, protect, and grow, with courage and peace." Ethan looked at her proud. She had changed, but she was still strong, stronger than ever. The empire began to heal. Alliances formed, old enemies became partners. The Queen and Ethan worked together to guide their people into a new era. And through it all, when she looked at him, there was a quiet promise, a future built not on war, but on choice, strength, and hope. The days that followed the rebellion's end were filled with hope and new beginnings. The alien empire, once torn by endless war, began to heal under the Queen's guidance. She walked the halls of her palace with renewed purpose. No longer only the warrior she was made to be, but a leader who chose peace. Ethan stood by her side through it all. Their bond had grown strong, built on trust and shared struggle. He had come to understand her in ways few ever could, and she had learned from him what it meant to fight for something more than survival. One morning, the Queen and Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Below, the people moved with cautious optimism. Shops reopened, children played in the streets, and soldiers trained not just for war, but for protection and peacekeeping. "This is not the empire I knew," Ethan said softly. "No," the Queen replied. It is the empire I want to build, one where strength comes from unity, not destruction. Their eyes met, full of hope and promise. She took his hand gently. You asked me once why I looked at you the way I did. Now I can answer. I see in you the choice I long for, the strength to fight for peace, to protect, to love. Ethan smiled. And I see in you a queen who is more than war. You are a future. News of the queen's new path spread across the galaxy. Some were skeptical, others inspired. Many sent ambassadors to learn from her and the humans who had helped change her. The queen invited Ethan to speak before the council once more. This time, she stood not alone, but with him beside her. Together, they spoke of hope, of peace, and the power of choice. War made me strong, she told the council, but peace will make us greater. We must choose to be more than what we were made for. The council listened, some with doubt, others with respect. The change would not come easily, but the Queen's courage had set the path. In the months that followed, the Queen and Ethan worked side by side to rebuild alliances and trust. They trained new leaders, shared knowledge, and spread the message. That strength was not just about battle, but about heart. One evening in the quiet of the palace, the Queen looked at Ethan. You changed me, human. Not with force, but with your belief in something better. He took her hand. You were never alone. You just needed someone to remind you. Their connection deepened, no longer only about war or peace, but about something personal and true. The Queen smiled, her armor left behind for once. Maybe I was made for war, but I choose to live for more. Ethan nodded. And I will be here for whatever comes next. Together, they faced the future, not as warrior and soldier, but as partners in a new era. The galaxy watched, some with hope, some with fear. But one thing was certain. A queen who was made for war had chosen peace, and with a human by her side, the empire would never be the same.